Hi. For the topic of today's video, I can't think of a better vehicle than a good old American muscle car. The topic is low-end torque, or more specifically, a lack of it in a Assetto Corsa. Ever noticed how every car seems to stall unless you give it full throttle off the line? There seems to be absolutely no torque down low, especially if you're only giving it half throttle. Well, let's see what can be done about it. Here are the files for the car we just saw. Power curve. And engine.ini. Now, for the changes, I've prepared these files earlier. I found out how to use turbo values to trick the game a little. Well, I'm sort of using these to create a vacuum in the engine. It reduces power at full throttle at low RPMs. The idea is that by mixing positive and negative pressures, you can alter the torque curve. It even shows up on the boost gauge as a vacuum that varies with the throttle position. There's different pressures for different RPMs, and the first one, which creates the main vacuum, creates the most pressure when the throttle is closed. But how? Well, let's see. That's where these control.ini files come into play. I'll explain. For each of the turbos there is a corresponding control file where I specify if I want the turbo to either increase power at low throttle and low RPMs, or decrease power at high RPMs and partial throttle. The first one targets high RPMs and partial throttle. It's a negative pressure turbo that works 100% when the throttle pedal is closed and tapers off when it's open. All to reduce power output when the revs rise, but the driver isn't adding more throttle. The line called LUT is crucial. When the throttle is open, fully pressed, 1, then the turbo goes to nil, no boost. Then when the throttle is lifted, when its value is 0, the boost goes to 1 and starts reducing power. And lastly, the multipliers for different RPMs to target high RPM only. And it's important to keep in mind that this so-called turbo is here to reduce power. Boost equals less power in this case. The purpose of the second imaginary turbo is to offset the power loss caused by the first one. It also helps the game driving instrument apps in that it equals into a sensible manifold pressure, so that the boost gauge won't read some crazy vacuum numbers. But before I continue any further, I think it might be necessary to explain more clearly what I'm after with these imaginary turbos. This is the base curve for the torque of this car. That's how fast the car accelerates at full throttle before any of the turbos are applied to alter the torque output. And this line roughly corresponds to the half-throttle torque output across the RPM range. It's not really the correct shape if we are after realism. Here's a shape that I'd like to aim for at half throttle. Less power up top, but more power down low, which is easily achieved with turbo values. Now the final so-called turbo. It looks like this. It's a small negative value turbo, or vacuum, if you will, which kicks in early in the RPM range and targets open throttle, just like a normal turbo. Basically there, just to make the boost gauge read below 0. Lastly, we can increase the torque of the base power curve lookup table. It shouldn't affect peak horsepower that much because of the negative pressure we are using. altered the base power lookup table to bring the low end torque up and gave the engine a vacuum. Because of the vacuum, the full power figure is brought back close to what it was originally. Here's an estimate based on the boost values. But why does not the peak power go up? It's complicated. Basically, it's because of the sum of all the various boost pressures modulates the power.ini figure. I could still add 1% more power in the power.ini file for every 0.01 bar of vacuum at full throttle. But this was about torque, not top end.